So very good afternoon to all of you, respected resource persons sir, of this session, Professor Ramesh Borpatrogohain sir, and my dear participants. This is the third technical session of today's program. And in this session, as I'm telling you earlier, that Professor Borpatrogohain sir will deliver his presentation on governance, accountability, and transparency. And before his presentation, may I request Bhavna Singh, researcher from University, to moderate this session. Thank you all. Over to Bhavna Singh.
Thank you, sir. So I welcome Professor Ramesh Borpatrogohain and all my fellow participants. I, on the behalf of the workshop committee and all my fellow participants, extend our heartiest thanks to Professor Gohan to be there to chair the 13th technical session of this week-long workshop. So before we begin with, I would like to give a brief account about sir. Professor Gohan is a former Advocate General in the government of Assam and currently working as a Senior Advocate General in Guwahati High Court. He is a former faculty of law in the Guwahati University, and sir has published a good number of books and journals in very renowned journals. So sir is here to enlighten us with his views on the topic governance, accountability, and transparency. So the session is all yours, sir. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So I welcome all the learned participants for this discussion on an important issue that is basically on good governance, accountability, transparency, and responsiveness. We are living in a largest democracy in the world, that is Indian democracy. We know the constitutional history. Through the history, gradually we have arrived at the era of independence, and we have drafted our own constitution, taking resort to different constitutional practices around the world, and best of the best have been brought into through different types of deliberation in the Constituent Assembly debates. And we know that the objective resolution that was adopted in 1946, that had been dealt upon, and ultimately that has been converted into the preamble of the Constitution. The basic region of governance, I like to refer to that preamble because it states, we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to ensure justice, social, economic, political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunities, and assuring the dignity of every individual and fraternity. And we the people have given to us the Constitution of India. So that is the important issue. And in my understanding, dealing with the Constitution for about 50 years, what I feel is that the people of India as sovereign authority and the Constitution are non-alienable. It cannot be separated one from the other. So based on that, let us go to the process of governance. One very important thing is that the government, I personally believe, it comprises of two parts. One is the govern, that is governing, and in that particular process, that process indicates about how to acquire the power to run the entire administration of justice. We have legislation which are entrusted with the lawmaking power, executive, which are entrusted with implementing the laws according to the mandate of the Constitution and also the objectives of the laws. And third is judiciary, which is also given the power of interpretation and independence. But then judiciary is also having that obligation and power the power is not coming automatically. It is a mandate of the people and also the indirect method of acquiring the power. Say, for example, in case of legislature, they are elected directly by the people. Executive, they are selected through the particular process as enshrined in the Constitution. And the judiciary, especially the higher judiciary, the Supreme Court and the High Courts I'm talking about, they are also entrusted with the power of justice according to law. So that is the acquiring of method of acquiring the power. And once the power has been acquired, how to implement, how to exercise the power for implementing those decisions that are taken at different level, legislature, lawmaking, they are taking certain decisions, and executive, they will have to take certain decisions in accordance with the mandate of the Constitution, and also the judiciary, which has also to exercise its power primarily for the greater benefit of the greater number of people in the country. Based on that, we must understand the basic difference between these two concepts. One is the govern, acquiring the power, and second part is governance, the exercising the power. How to acquire the power and how to exercise the power, these are provided by the Constitution and also subsequent laws that have been passed to the respective domain by the legislature of the country, especially the parliament and the state legislatures within that domain. So from that perspective, we can come to that who are the actors of this particular process of governance. Firstly, the government and its stakeholders. We have different institutions, different organs of the government, including these three parts: primary part, the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. And those functionaries are also entrusted with certain powers through the particular process, and they are to exercise through obligation under the Constitution to meet the requirements or needs of the society. Their aspiration, their hopes must be translated into realities. So that is the government actors. There are other non-government actors. Say, for example, in the global in the global scenario, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the United Nations Organization, and its organs, which are really responsible for human rights around the world, they are in the international level. Then also the committees and also the NGOs, research institutes, finance institutes, political parties, and military, etc. These are also the actors in the national, in the international level, but in the local level, there are certain actors whose actions are not in adherence to the mandate of the Constitution and also the laws and rules and regulations framed under that spirit. Say, for example, there are certain local people who have got dominance because of their wealth, because of their well-to-do, and they try to exert the pressure upon the common people who are at the receiving end of the constitutional mandate or the constitutional facilities. And there are other actors who are not the government actors or the actors of the military. They are said to be civil society. So this is the process through which we have to understand the governance and the government. Now, coming to the characteristics of our good governance, when can we say that it is governance? Governance is the process of decision making and the process by which the decisions are implemented, or if it is not conducive to the Constitution and the laws, it is not to be implemented. There are certain policies which are created by the state under the directive principles of state policies, which are not found to be conducive to the people's need and requirements, and that is why those are not to be implemented. And when they are in the process of implementation, those are to be withdrawn, because it is contrary to the public interest. Now there are as many as it was decided in a UN level, IMF and the World Bank, and also the United Nations fronts. There are basically 8 major characteristics. First is, it is participatory. The governance must be participatory. In our constitution, you will find that there are provisions for 3-tier governments. The government at the top, union government, union legislature, the government at the intermediate position, the state level, the state government and the state legislature, and the 3rd tier of government, Article 243 of the Constitution, that speaks provide for Panchayati Raj or Swaraj system. This 3rd tier of government. But one very important thing is, in India, the 2 earlier 1st tier, union, and the 2nd tier, the state, they are functioning properly. But then in case of the 3rd tier, the local bodies, say for example, the Panchayati Raj system, there this is not properly implemented, or this is not properly brought into operation, as the case may be. Though it has got a constitutional status, even today cooperative societies are considered to be constitutional authorities, constitutional institutions. And Swaraj, that was the idea that every citizen of the country, right from the grassroots to the top, will participate in the process of democratic setup, so that they will acquire the experience and they will apply their experience for the betterment of the movement of constitutionalism in India, so that the objective with which the Indian constitution was framed, that objectives can be fulfilled. One important thing I like to draw the attention of the learned participants, that the primary objective, the first objective of the Constitution of India was equality. And that was to be achieved within a period of 10 years, right from 26 January 1950 to 26 January 1960. We failed. And that failure is continuing even after 70 years of our independence. And that is a result that the participatory democracy is not allowed by some factors to grow, as it was the idea that within 10 years, everything social, economic, political, educational, cultural aspects of all the nationalities in India will be equalized. We failed, and we have been failing. And for that, we cannot blame the Constitution, that Constitution failed us. We have failed the Constitution. That is first part. It is participatory. So in our constitutional practice, whether this is really participatory characteristics of governance is really adhered to or implemented or uplifted is a very debatable question. It is debated by different jurists in the field of social, economic, political, legal sciences, and they have also provided different types of solution to this. And as a result of which, we have to do much Herculean task for arriving at those goals, adhering to the ideas and the deliberations made by the jurists and the personalities related with this aspect. Second is consensus orientation. In the good governance, consensus is necessary. We are in a democracy. The sovereign power is with the people, that is the people or citizen of the country, and based on their consensus, based on their wish, based on their will or the general will, the process should start, or the functioning of the governance should continue. But in the long run, for the last 70 years or more than 70 years, we have been seeing the working of the Constitution, whether this Constitution is in a position to take care of, through this mechanism of good governance, to the meet with the aspiration, need, requirements which are daily or fast, which are changing daily or in a fast manner. The hopes, aspirations, our constitutional practice of good governance, and the responsibilities and obligations which are entrusted upon these authorities or the actors are really discharging their due obligation and due duties, so that it is really going for the benefit of we the people. Most importantly, we wanted to equalize economically, socially, politically, the status of the common people, status of the citizen of the country, irrespective of caste, creed, gender, place of birth, as the case may be. But then we have been failing, because what is the missing point? That missing point. That meeting point is to be addressed. That meeting point is to be addressed. And second aspect is, when we talk of consensus, then we have to take care of, as we have. Mute हो गया। तुम्हें हेतु के दे ना लगे दे हेतु के दे हेतु के दे ऐसे सही। So I'm very sorry because of technical snag I had to win.
Recording in progress.
Hello. Is it audible to all? Hello. Is it audible to all now? Hello. Tata isn't. Hello. 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 Hello.
Sir, you are audible. You can continue.
Sorry, because of the technical snag, I had to. Anyway, so we'll continue. Then as I was talking about the consensus orientation in the process of the governance, good governance. So there, what we find that when we talk of consensus of whom? That is a very important aspect in the good governance. Consensus of we the people of India, because as I have said at the very beginning, that we, the people of India, and the Constitution are inseparable. When you talk of Constitution, automatically it must strike in our mind, we, the people, as annexed to it. So that is why, so whenever we are talking about the good governance or implementing certain decisions or the policies, whether those policies are really acceptable, commensurating to the needs, hopes, and aspiration of this changing time and of the people is very important globally, nationally, and also locally. So if that is not, then in that case, we can say there is a snag in the process of the orientation of the good governance and on the issue of or the characteristics of consensus orientation. Next to it is accountability. As we know that the Constitution of India schedule of the Constitution, the oath of administering oath to the constitutional authorities, whether the President of India, the Prime Minister, the other ministers, the Chief Justice of India, other judges, the High Court Chief Justice and other judges, and all the other constitutional authorities, including these information commissions or many other institutions which are operating under the Constitution. So then in that case, commensurating to the oath or adhering to the oath that is administered to these constitutional authorities, the main important thing is that they take oath in the name of the Constitution that they will defend the Constitution and the laws. And while doing that, when we talk of Constitution, automatically people's right and interest comes in, especially the downtrodden people who are ostracized in our society in a different way. So in that context, as we're talking about the accountability, then we must take resort to the oath part of the Constitution, to those constitutional authorities, and also other institutions which are created by the Constitution, as I mentioned about it in that case. So whether they are really discharging their obligation under the oath so that the governance can be said to be a good governance, and the comfortability through that good governance comes to the people's rights, interests, their liberty, their freedoms, as the case may be. So the third category, third characteristic is that, and fourth is transparency. Transparency is very important in a democratic setup like India. And as we know that in the world, immediately after the period of Renaissance and Reformation, in the country like Sweden, Sweden is the first country to confer the right to information to its citizens through the Information Act of 1766. The information that is acquired by the government, the information that is held by the Swedish government are made accessible to the citizen of that country in 1766 itself. Then Sweden is the first country again in the world which has created the institutions of ombudsman. Ombudsman is an institution totally independent of the government structure. And this institution is given full authority in the Swedish system that they will take account of the complaints that is made to the higher authorities, including the ministers or the bureaucrats or any other functionaries under the Constitution of Sweden, and their mechanism of investigation if they find independent authority to exercise their power in commensurating or proportionate punishment to those guilty persons, even if they are in the high ups of the system. But mostly in India, we are very much inclined to American system. For your information, in America, exactly after 200 years of Swedish enactment of 1766 in America, in 1966, the Freedom of Information Act has been enacted. And that is going on. And in India, in 1966, it was thought that in the parliament that there is a whether there is a requirement of an institution like ombudsman in India. Then a committee, Constitution Reform Committee, was constituted under the chairmanship of then MP Morarji Desai, and they have gone to all sections of people, all institutions and authorities, and after thorough deliberation, they have submitted a report that there is a requirement of an institution like ombudsman in India, and they have termed this institution to be the Lokpal, and in the state level, Lokayukta. But then, unfortunately, right from 66 onward till 2013, the bill was introduced in the parliament on 8 occasions, but then on all occasions it failed. Now, another development that has taken place in India, in 2003, the United Nations has adopted the Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, United Nations Convention Against Corruption. India is a member state to the United Nations. India has participated in the process. And in 2011, on 9th of May, 2011, India has ratified that instrument, or that United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And once we ratify under the constitutional provision, Article 51C, and also Article 253 of the Constitution, we owe an international obligation to convert that the instrument into a national legal order, or make a national law under item 12, 13, and 14 of the Union list of the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. And accordingly, since 2011, the Joint Drafting Committee was constituted. But then there were so many debates and discussions, differences. But ultimately, in 2011, a draft has been prepared. But then in the parliament that was discussed, but that draft required more deliberation. And ultimately, in 2013, the parliament has passed the act as the Lokayukta Act of 2013, along with Lokpal Act of 2013, along with Lokayuktas for the states. The main purpose was that, as we were talking about in Sweden and in America or in Britain as well, Britain has also passed the Right to Information Act in 2005. And in India, we have also enacted the Act 2005, Right to Information Act. Now, the main question is relating to transparency, along with the accountability. So transparency is that when the government is functioning, good government requires and demands the transparency in their activities, transparency in utilizing the fund collected from we the people through the process of direct and indirect taxes, and how it is utilized, it is to be ensured. And for that matter, to scrutinize these under Article 148 to 150 of the Constitution, there is a provision for there's a provision for a scrutiny by another institution, and that manner that it should be done. Now, institutions by this act, even if the act has come into operation on the 1st January 2014, but then that act was still not operative, because there is a difference of opinion in choosing the Lokpal in the national level. And Supreme Court has deliberated often, given direction to the government on 2 occasions, Union government 2 occasions, to constitute the forum so that these activities which are contrary to the spirit of the Constitution, contrary to the good governance, are to be faced. And in that context, in 2000, international obligation was enacted. and Central Vigilance Commission was constituted. The purpose of Central Vigilance Commission's constitution is that the Central Vigilance Commission will investigate through their investigation process. What are the complaints that are lodged against these authorities? And after that, they will find a report that they will complete, they will arrive at a final decision that a report. And in case of, say, complaint lodged to the Lokpal, the matter will be referred for investigation by the Central Vigilance Commission, and the Central Vigilance Commission will send it back on Group A, Group B, the Group B like government officials or the institutions, say, for example, including the ministers of the union against whom the complaint has been launched, and whether this justification is there on the complaint or not. That will be sent back, Group A and Group B, to the Lokpal, and the Lokpal as an institution will look into it and pass the order accordingly about the involvement or not of those persons against whom the allegation has been made. And for the Group C and D, the Central Vigilance Commission has the authority to look into it and to do appropriate legal measures for proportionate punishment prescribed as per law to be imposed upon those persons who are found to be guilty belonging to category of Group C and Group D. Then Comptroller and Auditor General, under Article 148 to 150, it is there that the Comptroller and Auditor General, which is another independent institution under the Constitution, it is also under the domain of good governance. And their main function is to go through the allotment of fund, then appropriation, and how the money is utilized under the state government or other authorities that are attached to the union and the state government, as the case may be. So that authority, that authority will send the report to the government, and that is to be discussed in the parliament as well as the state legislature, and thereupon a decision is to be taken in an open manner through the debate in publicly in the parliament and also in the state legislature, as the case may be. Good governance has another dimension. In the parliament, there are different committees which are constituted for the purpose of dealing with specific areas. And say, for example, Public Accounts Committee, that is there in the Union Parliament, that is also there in the state parliament, and other parliamentary committees, state legislative committees are there for dealing with, so that the good governance, transparency, the case, the transparency, whether that is properly maintained or not in all the institutions, that is a very important issue to be deliberated upon. Next is responsiveness. Sometimes responsibility and responsiveness are two. Responsiveness is a sumoto action, is a prompt action, voluntary action that is to be taken, resort to by the person who is really entrusted with the process of good governance in any form, in any state. And secondly, responsibility is that they will be informed, and based on that, they will proceed through, and thereafter they will arrive at a certain point, whether it is really detrimental to the people's interests, people's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, or it is really conducive for that according to the constitutional mandate. Now, responsiveness has another dimension. As I mentioned about Article 38 and 39 of the Constitution, it speaks about in consonance with the commitment in the preamble about justice, social, economic, political. So economic, social, and political justice has to be implemented in the real spirit and adhering to Article 38, social justice, economic justice, and also Article 39, primarily the economic justice, and also the protection of interest of especially women and children. As we know that in India, 50% of the population belongs to women folk. And in most of the cases, women folk are not in a position to participate in the participatory democracy in any form. And that is why Swami Vivekananda has also given much emphasis to these two weaker sections, especially women and children, because children are the future of the country. And that is why through women, the future of the children can be molded very effectively, adhering to the good governance system. And that is why responsiveness under Article 38, social justice and economic justice, and economic opportunities and distribution of natural resources and natural wealth in an appropriate manner, so that everybody gets the share of his claim under that process. And in this functioning of, in the name of the good governance in India, I think there are much lacking, and there is big gap, because of which the gap between the rich and the poor are increasing in a very rapid manner, and poor are becoming poorer and poorest, and the rich are becoming richer and richest. So that gap of rich and poor, that is to be abridged through this particular process of doing justice, social, economic, political, through the good governance by the people who are really responsible and authority. And in this particular context, I like to refer to the responsibilities and the responsiveness of the judiciary. And judiciary has and the judiciary has the reality. The Article 141 of the Constitution of India, the Supreme Court, when pronounces the judgment, it becomes binding on all. It becomes binding on all, and it becomes binding on all, and they have to carry it accordingly. So whether it is the bindingness is applicable to each and every citizen of the country, each and every institution of the country, as the case may be. So from that perspective, judicial independence and judicial decisions, which are having the finality. And another important thing is that once the judiciary has pronounced it, it is to be considered to be a law of the land, and under that domain, with the responsiveness, the other organs, whether legislature, in modifying the law as mandated by the judiciary, or in implementing the law in a proper spirit by the executive, is a mandate. But in most of the cases, it is seen that even if we are talking about the good governance, but then e-governance or whatever that might be, it is not appropriately implemented too, because of some differences of opinion, as the case may be, and contrary to the mandate of the Constitution, that is also not healthy for good governance in our country. And a second aspect is effectiveness and efficiency. So efficient government, effectiveness of implementing the policy is a very important factor. And there I feel that there's a requirement of updating the knowledge process, the ICT, in ICT form or in whatever form. And there should be orientation courses, refresher courses, and other similar courses for updating the ICT and all other aspects. There are people who are dealing with that, and their knowledge is to update in such a way that the present day requirements are taken care of with an appropriate hand. And if it is not proper, then in that case, the issues are unaddressed, as a result of which the difference of opinion and crisis crops up like
like anything. So effectiveness, that means if I have thorough knowledge of implementing the policy according to the present day requirement of time, need, hopes and aspiration of the people, then only I will be able to effectively discharge my function under the domain of good governance. Otherwise, it will lag much behind, as a result of which the needy persons, the beneficiaries, are deprived of their benefits provided by the effective or good governance process. So effectiveness and effective efficiency are important. Then next to it is equitable and inclusiveness. Equitability and inclusiveness. Equitability, that all the citizens of the country, irrespective of their caste, creed, gender, place of birth, which are to be considered to be equal under the domain of the protection of human rights and under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, it provides that all the persons, every person is born free with dignity and equal rights. And nobody should be discriminated based on caste, creed, gender, place of birth, as the case may be. And everybody has a choice, and that choice is to be respected. So from that perspective, everybody's interest is to be well protected by the effective process of good governance in our country and the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, which has established the Human Rights Commission, National Human Rights Commission, State Human Rights Commission, and the state human rights communities are to be constituted yet, and their function is to be properly addressed. And in this particular case, Section 12 FGH,
Sorry.
FGH. So, would you please maintain the silence, because I'm getting disturbance. Some participants are opening it to the event, so it is very difficult on my part to do that. My attention is diverted. Please do not do that. If you are not at all interested, please
Sir,
quit
sorry for
or
interruption.
let me quit.
I'd
This
like
is
to
bad
request
habit.
Mandira Bora, please switch off your mic. Mandira Bora. Mandira Bora,
But
madam,
this is
please
bad
switch off
habit.
your mic.
Either you quit or I'll quit. It's an insult to me. It is an insult to me. How dare you insult me? If I'm
Yes, sir.
talking nonsense, you directly say that you are talking nonsense, I'll quit. This is bad.
Yes, sir.
I'm extremely sorry.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, because some participants are disturbing. That's why I'm. Yes, sir.
No, I'm talking about those persons who are disturbing. This is bad. It's an insult to my position.
Yes, sir.
If I'm talking nonsense, say straight away that you are talking nonsense, you know nothing. I'll quit. Rather, I will apologize because I have got no knowledge at all. This is bad. It's a mockery. It's a mockery of the system. You are just waiting for getting a certificate to desk. I don't subscribe to this. Extremely sorry. Dr. Das, I'm extremely sorry. Can I continue?
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
So Dr. Das, Dr. Das, I'm extremely
Yes, sir.
sorry. Because you see, anyway. So I'm talking about equitability and also inclusiveness. Say, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is binding on us under Article 51C and 253 of the Constitution of India, and Article 31+1 of the Constitution of India, that under 7th schedule, the Union list, item 12, 13, and 14, it mandated that all the international instruments are to be reduced into national law by the Parliament. And I mentioned about Right to Information Act, Section 12, Clause FGH. It speaks about that the Human Rights Commission, National Human Rights Commission will make research, will engage proper study of those instruments which will be beneficial for the people of the country, and thereafter they are to advise the actors of the good governance how to continue with that spirit and how to essentially make improvement of the good governance in the country. Article Section 12, clause F, G, H. These are very important. I will appeal that this should be looked into under the domain of good governance. Next important aspect is that we have said in the preamble that we are going for fraternity, assuring the dignity of every individual. And Article 14, it speaks about equality of status and of opportunities of every citizen of the country, and their right to life and right to personality. And as we know that naturally by the Creator, we have been given three important precious rights which are more fundamental. That is right to life, right to liberty, right of liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So everybody has to be included in the process of conferring these three rights, protecting these three rights by the government. The government is a process through which these rights are to be protected by under the good governance. Right to life, it is not conferred by the government, nor it is created by any institution. Right to liberty, it is created by the Creator, and right to pursuit of it by the organs known as government. And good governance has to take care of all these aspects. Next to it, that rule of law. All these are to be governed under the principles of rule of law. What rule of law means? In the Central Secretariat, if we pay a visit to that Central Secretariat, at the top of the gate, it is written that respect the state, the root of law and wealth. But that is a misnomer to the rule of law. The actual norm, according to our Indian culture and according to our universal culture, is that respect the law, the root of state and the wealth. And I think we have to make a paradigm shift from that rule of the state to rule of law, and the state being under the domain of rule of law, and also the wealth and natural resources that are to be distributed among the citizens proportionately as per their requirements is the order of the rule of law. And that aspect is very much important. And considering that dimension, as I have very beginning, it said that the process of good governance depends entirely on improving the culture, the heritage, and the practices that is coming from the time immemorial, and it is continuing still there. That is the process of tradition, the customs. Say, for example, right from Gita, in chapter 4, verse 1 of Gita, Lord Krishna has said that he first provided the knowledge of parampara or tradition to God, Son, Vibhasan, and Vibhasan in turn had given that knowledge of parampara tradition to the first Adi man Manu, and Manu accordingly has given that idea of traditional respect to his son Ikshaku, and that continued. But then again, during Mahabharata, Lord Krishna has to appear personally and give suggestion to Arjuna. Arjuna is we the people, and through that disciplic succession of these traditions has been a practice in India. And in Kautilya's Arthashastra also, we find innumerable instances how the rulers are to behave. And if we go to the Greek philosophy, Greek civilization, then we find Plato has said that the philosophers are to become the king, or the kings are to become philosopher, so that the country does not suffer, so that the humanism prevails in the country, as the case may be. So the ruler should have the philosophic ideas, the philosophic intuition, so that he will think about, when we're talking of the ruler, now it's the rule by many in a democracy or a polity. Rule by many is a form of government, which may be said to be democracy, or it may be a polity. So whether it is a polity or a democracy, it is ruled by many. And under the domain of the Constitution of India, it is also a structure of rule by many, as we know that in the infrastructural or hierarchical order, the Constitution has provided, and other statutes have provided under the spirit of the Constitution, different institutions, they are to function in a hierarchical order in adhering to that particular principle. Now, in that context, they practice, they practice in the good governance. It requires that paramparic or the disciplic order of knowledge and scientific aspect, as the case may be. And one important aspect, the good governance is decentralization of power, cooperative federalism. The GST Act that was Constitution, and the idea was how to decentralize the economic power and invest or distribute money to the states according to their requirements, and how they can appropriate that money for the betterment of the development, progress, education, health, hygiene of the citizen belonging to that particular state. So decentralization of power or cooperative federalism, it is not the unitary federalism Indian Constitution has spoken. It is cooperative federalism. Based on that, the good governance must continue, so that right at the lowest level, that is the third tier of government, as we're talking about the Panchayati Raj system, or the municipalities, and also in the cooperative societies, which is also included under the Constitution as a constitutional institution, there also this practice must go. But in certain cases, it is found I have the practical experience of dealing with certain issues on this, whether I was there in the policy process and also outside the policy process. The fund that is to be allocated to the third tier of government is very meager, and the process is very slow, as a result of which Swaraj, the self-rule process, is frustrated, and the people who are soldiering the responsibility through the election system, direct election system, in the Gram Panchayat, the Panchayat system, Anchalik Panchayat, as the case may be. So the policies implementation is not in proper order, as a result of which the common people are suffering. And for that, I personally feel that there should not be barrier as provided therein. And another important aspect of the constitutional provision I like to draw attention to. Now, the third tier government at the district level is run by district administration. The deputy commissioner or we say district magistrate, and also the superintendent police of the district, they are running the district administration. As we know that in the Panchayat system, see, the highest authority in the Panchayat system, that is not having that authority that is conferred on that. So if it is to be Swaraj at the three-tier government, that is to be enhanced. So that their power is to be enhanced in such a way that their elected body and the deputy commissioner and the SP is a person selected through a process. But then people's mandate and the selecting committee's mandate of the deputy commissioner and the superintendent of police. And we have to make arrangement in that way. And I think there must be deliberation, academic deliberation to that particular perspective, so that we can make the third tier of government very effective and very forceful and very meaningful, and the open government, transparency, and the good governance can continue to the grassroots level, and the benefits percolate down to them in a very effective manner. So from that perspective, what I feel is that good governance, there are many works to be done. There are many research works to be contemplated. There are many research orientations, deliberations, academic discussions at different level are necessary, especially in the academic world, especially by the different types of jurists have been propounding different theories, ideas. We are to cultivate those ideas, and we are to motivate the policymakers in such a way that we become a most effective actor, positive actor, voluntary actor in motivating the spirit of the system in a very effective manner. Another important aspect is that the probity, the honesty, the integrity, and also the ethics. Ethics is a science. So the science of ethics is to be imbibed in the human internal conduct. So every human, that spiritual, the spiritual element is to be inducted in such a way to the process. When we were in the secondary or primary school, there were different types of lessons on ethics, morals, and prudence, and also probity, as the case may be, by different examples. And it was ingrained into our young child human psyche, and that continued, or that is still stacking in our mind, to be honest, to be maintaining the probity and honesty and integrity. And I feel that if we can think about incorporating that spirit or the culture of the ethics or the morality or the prudence and also the probity in the mind, which I feel is a very important aspect, then if ethically we will continue with that spirit, then I think in the near future we can build up the system more effectively, have a better standing in India, and that may be an example for rest of the world to follow. As in the formation of the United Nations, the spirit of formation of United Nations was based on Indian culture, and one Sanskrit sloka, Ayam Neja Parvati Ganana Laghu Seita Sam Udara Saritanam to Vasudeva Kutumbakam. It is speaking about humanity, humanism, human values, and unless we improve the human values in us, even if we try to check the corruption, corruption will continue in that particular perspective. Another important aspect I like to draw the attention, it is regarding of our election of our representative. The Representation of People Act 1951, especially Section 8. If there is an amendment to incorporate the provision that the people who are coming to the process of election at any level, right at the third tier level, second tier level, first tier level, they must have a clean antecedent. They must not be involved in any crime. No criminal proceeding must continue, and they must have a clean hand to join the politics. And even if under Article 33A of the Representation of People Act, it provides for submitting an affidavit, but in most of the cases, the report reveals, the Transparency World, a report reveals that at least 40% of the people who are representing the Indian population in the parliament, they have criminal cases pending in the courts in the process of trial.
And if that being so, then in that case, it will be impracticable to talk about the open government or effective government or good governance in our country. That is only one example. In other domains as well, there are other factors which are really responsible for taking resort to corruption right from the grassroots to the top. And as a result of which the corruption is a syndrome. And for checking that corruption and bringing that transparency in the global level, the Convention Against Corruption 2003, it speaks about transnational cooperation in assisting by one country to the other country for removing the corruption syndrome in that country, so that there is an opportunity for all living beings to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in a very effective manner. And if we just phase out those syndromes in an appropriate manner, and I think that operating the good governance will be very effective. And corruption syndrome, first is that, as I talked about, the probity, the human values, the decency, morality must be lessons incorporated in our culture, in our education system, and that aspect is very important. And for that matter, in the secondary level, the Right of the Child to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009, in section 29, clause 1, it provides for incorporating the lessons based on the values enshrined in the Constitution. Article 19 of the Constitution, 19(1) of the Constitution provides for especially reasonable restrictions, and reasonable restrictions in the form of the values enshrined in the Constitution, decency, morality, social order, and also the probity and prudence. These are the important values that are enshrined in the Constitution. And if we can continue that lessons along with the formal lessons in our courses, right at the secondary level, tertiary level, or the higher level, then I think that culture will definitely reform the system, phase out those syndromes, and we will have a better India and better world where there will be no crisis, where there will be harmony that will prevail around the world. So I like to conclude my speech, and I'm just opening it for discussion. And if any query or interaction is there, I'm ready to answer those. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the detailed, insightful session. I, on the behalf of workshop committee and all my fellow participants, would want to apologize for whatever happened in the course of the session. Now I open the entire session for all the participants to put on their queries.
Sir, good afternoon. I am Kunjalata Brahmavatari. I have quite a number of questions that I wanted to ask, if time permits, but I'll start with one.
Okay.
Sir, the idea, I mean, good governance is an idea, is a thought, is a philosophy, which, you know, as a very, very new democracy in India was always adopted right from the day that, you know, the independence came in.
Yeah.
But then right of now, with the ongoing narrative and everything, good governance speaks of being equitable and inclusive.
Yes.
These two terms and words are something that I have a lot of issues with. Because when you talk in terms of being equitable, you know, the very groundwork of equity has been shaken. Inclusivity, again, I specifically have lots of doubts with, you know, the entire, you know, the international politics and everything targeting and questioning India on a lot of, you know, selective targets being made in the country. So where and how do we still rely on the very, you know, the so-called pillars of good governance when it comes to India as a democracy? If these very things are being questioned at the international level also, sir.
So basic thing is that if we look at the composition of the Constituent Assembly, then find that more than 50% of the people associated with that
Constituent Assembly were prominent lawyers, enlightened people of social activities, and dedicated people. They wanted to advance the country, but then not at the cost of sacrificing their own culture and heritage. That was the idea with which they have incorporated therein. For example, if I refer to you Article 51, capital A, fundamental duties, at that point of time, the noble framers of the Constitution thought that duty is a culture in India. Karma. In Gita, karmanye ba adhikareshu ma phaleshu kadasan. Ma karma phala hetu, so and so. So karma, that is duty, is the cardinal principle of our tradition of parampara. And the framers and those enlightened people thought that definitely that is imbibed and that is continuing in the mind of average citizen of the country of independent India. So they have deliberately dropped the idea of reminding the people about their duties, because duties should have been in our heart. But we failed. Only in 1976, for the 42nd Amendment, we were to be reminded about that we are to respect the national anthem, we are to respect the national flag, we are to respect the women folk in our country, we are to protect the environment, we are to preserve our culture, heritage, and we as parents are to be responsible for educating our children as a part of responsibility. So that is an indication that we were overwhelmed with Anglo-Saxon principles of dominance. Only the color sense of the mentality did not change. So that perception is still continuing in our mind. As a result of which, so as we're talking about, these syndromes are cropping up. And the values, as we know, that when Britishers came to India, the value system of our education right from Vedic time, that continued in a very classic way. See, Takshashila, then Nalanda, where the universities, when the entire world were not getting the light of the torch of education, at that point of time, India was establishing universities like Takshashila, and later on the other universities. But then in the Takshashila, see, people came from around the world to be educated not only on the culture, not only on heritage, but also on human values, medical science, infrastructural sciences, and what not. Everything that were taught during that period. And we have, as because Britishers came, and Lord Macaulay, he made a statement in the British Parliament on the probably 2nd of September, 1835, that if we are to overcome or if we are to prevail over this nation, then we'll have to impose our education system. We have to impose our culture and heritage in such a way they become addicted to our culture. We are addicted that way. And that is why I think in the 42nd Amendment, we were to be reminded like this. One very important thing is, as I have mentioned about, please note down, Right to Information Act 2005, Section 12, Clause FGH. And I think you will get your answer therein, but then that is also not acted upon appropriately. And if that would have been appropriately acted upon, then there would have been a clear congenial atmosphere where we could have expect much better good governance in our country. And that right from the grassroots level to the top, the corruption has cropped in such a way and the cancerous form that has taken into form. And now the corruption is a practice, and now the numericals have gone from lakhs to crores and 1,000 crores. The denomination is increasing like anything. So if we are to check it, first we are to internally uplift our
value system. And for that thing, I think right from the grassroots level, the component or the element of value education should be properly implemented along with formal courses of science, technology, or other disciplines as the case may be. And I think definitely we are going to get back the lost system of India. Then India will again be a leader in the world for educating that do not go for war, come for peace, human values. I think that way. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. If Madam Moderator permits, I would like to ask another question.
Thank you.
Sir, this is with respect to Article 244, capital A, the governance of the 6th schedule area.
Yes, yes. It now.
Sir, I believe this is sir. My question is with respect to Article 244, capital A, sir.
Yes. Yes, it's Article 244. You are talking of the 6 schedule areas. Yes,
yes,
you are
absolutely. Now, yes, sir. The Constitution clearly speaks of giving absolute autonomy with respect to forest, water, land management in these areas. But I mean, all that is just there in namesake, because constitutionally what is there is not being done in reality. On the other hand, there is a lot of intervention both from the state government as well as from the central government side also in these areas which are supposed to be absolutely manned and looked after in a very, very autonomous way by the 6th schedule areas, 6th schedule governance system. So, sir, why is this happening? Isn't this something which goes against the very spirit of what the 6th schedule provides for?
See, first thing is, even if it is given autonomy, even 5th schedule areas were also there and 6th schedule areas, even if that autonomy is given, but that autonomy is only through the exercise of executive power of the president under Article 163 of the Constitution. So there, the entire administration is governed by the power exercisable under 163 of the Constitution of India. So whatever, yes, we talk about autonomy. The 6 schedule areas that was deliberated upon during the Constituent Assembly, and because of strong deliberation and demand of Prime Minister, didn't Prime Minister, it was called Prime Minister, or after on, it is the Chief Minister of Assam, Gopinath Bordoloi. Because of his strong deliberation, the 5th and the 6th schedule of the Constitution had been incorporated. And the main purpose was that the hill areas especially, they are found to be less advanced economically, socially, culturally, and distanced from the development. And that is why they should be given autonomy, not only the autonomy of administration, but then finance are to be provided that should get sufficient fund for implementation of that of the policies that are required under the 6 schedule areas. Now, even in plains, you know that after 2000, in the plains also, Bodo autonomy is also there in 6 schedule BTR. See, main purpose is that they will try to understand and talk to the people right from the grassroots level, at the last person, to know about what are his requirements, what are benefits that are to be provided to them so that he can lead a life with dignity. And that process is there. But again, I said about, there also this syndrome of cancerous corruption is still there. And very recently, and as I was present there in the Honorable Guwahati High Court, the bridge was proposed to be constructed at the cost of 295 crores. The contractor has started and completed 30% of the work there. 30% of the work there. After that, the matter has
come to the High Court, and High Court intervened. That was not procedurally done. That is why it should be done procedurally. And I have seen in a newspaper, the local daily, most popular daily, the Assam Tribune, that the tender inviting applications and tender inviting process has started. Now the person who was entrusted with the work and who has completed 30% of the work without DPR, whether he will be also in the fray or not. See, that is also a strong syndrome. First, we know that to construct a building or construct a bridge, detailed project report is essential, and thereafter the tender system, open tender system is to there, technical bid, financial bid is to be done, and adhering to that, if everything is done well, then it is to be, the work is to be allotted to the appropriate person and construction is to be done therein. So in the 6 scheduled areas also, there are other, say, autonomous areas. It is not my view. It is, there are many cases which are there, which are fought in the Guwahati, Honorable Guwahati High Court, and they are from learning, educating from that only. I'm saying that the autonomous areas also are not there, not in a healthy manner. So that is why from both the sides we'll have to look into, yes, autonomy is there, and to monitor that autonomy, the power that is assigned to the governor of the state under Article 163 of the Constitution, and under that Article 163 clause 3, even the Council of Ministers of the state cannot prevail over the power that is assigned to the governor of the state. That means he has got full authority, and through that authority, and also the autonomy that is provided under the 244A to the 6 scheduled areas, effective results may be obtained if these two syndromes are: one is the tap that is flowing the fund from the union government directly, and through the judicious intervention of the governor comes to the district councils, and also the wastage, as I have mentioned about, the wastage that is there in the system. If these two things are plugged, then I think there will be flourishing development and there will be reality.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, there's another question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Easy Rani. She's of the opinion that all the features of good governance that you have talked about is left to the books only, and there are problems in implementation. So what's your take on this?
I have already answered it. Even if I have said the characteristics of good government, I have already referred to constitutional provisions. I have also referred to constitutional authorities. I have also referred to oath of office. Say, for example, 3rd schedule, the constitutional authority. I so and so swear in the name of God that I will discharge my duties without any fear or favor, and I will defend the Constitution and the laws of the country. So that way the oath is administered. Before the administering of oath, no constitutional authority can start functioning. So that is the process. But as I have said about our mental impurity, then also the mental impurity that is impured by or influenced by the materialistic objective in our mind. And unless we phase out that materialistic objective from our mind and service orientation, as we know, the concept of service, everywhere it is service, public service. So for example, the Prime Minister, the other ministers, the Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Chief Justice of India, Honorable Judges, Honorable Chief Ministers, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Judges of the High Court, as the case may be, all the constitutional authorities are empowered only through that oath. Oath is a declaration that I will discharge my duties appropriately. But I do not
directly blame it in a generalized manner. But then there is a coordination and cooperation. As I've said about number of judgments of the Supreme Court, which is binding on all under Article 141 of the Constitution. But in the process of implementation, as we do not have a clear mind, as we do not have a heart of humanity, it is lagging behind and it is not implemented. And that is why the drawbacks, syndromes, lapses I have analyzed, I have discussed in the particular form of those primary 8 characteristics. And if we hunt to them, as I've said about in the district level of government, tier government, say, Panchayati Raj system, as we see that the Panchayati Raj system in the district level, the district administration is in the hands of district magistrate. But it should be on the elected body of the Panchayati Raj system. Gram Panchayat, Anchalik Panchayats, then Jila Parishad. In the Jila Parishad, that is the highest elected body according to the Panchayati Raj system of 1994. And according to Article 243 of the Constitution of India, it is a constitutional authority. But then, as because there is no deliberation upon giving that infrastructure and also recognition, and it is run somehow through the district administration, that is why I think there is a blockade. There is a clog in the process of, say, the Panchayati Raj system or Swaraj system, which was the idea that right from the grassroots, everybody will be participating in the process of administration and will contribute and join hands in the development of the country. So therefrom, these are the characteristics, drawbacks I have mentioned about, provisions providing obligation, provisions providing duties I have mentioned about, and therefrom to harmonize that, how to improve it in a juristic manner. Juristically, we are to analyze, we are to convince the policy makers through our deliberation, discussions, writes up, then I think at a certain point of time, it will definitely be in order.
Sir, there is yet another question in the chat box.
Yeah.
That from Sameer Pegu. He wants to ask that what is the importance of right to information for good governance in our country?
See, right to information, as I've talked about, that participatory method, participation is the first cardinal principles of good governance. Why? As I've said in the preamble, we the people, the declaration is we the people of India having solemnly affirmed that aspect is very important. Then we have given to ourselves this constitution. We the people of India solemnly affirm to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic and other things. And finally, given to ourselves this constitution on this 26th day of November, 1949. That means constitution and we the people, the sovereign power, they are inseparable. When we're talking of the constitution, we must talk about we the people's sovereignty. And that is why sovereign people, they are contributing for the consolidated fund of India. They are empowering the representatives of the people and also other forms in that indirect method, the power to be exercised. And that is why the people who are contributing fund, say in a taxing method, we are not sparing even the beggars to pay indirect tax. GST, hypothetically, if I am a beggar, I'm begging alms door to door, and I've got 200 rupees for the whole day, and I've gone to a fair price shop for buying essential commodities. Then is there any provision in that GST Act of the Constitution that I'm exempted from GST and other taxes? No, I am to pay tax. Consider, I'm giving an arithmetical example. Supposing the total population of India is 140 crores. If 1% of that population belongs to the category have-nots, the beggars, then their population is 1 crore 40 lakhs. If one beggar belonging to that have not pays 1 rupee as a tax in any form, the contribution to the Consolidated Fund of India of the have-nots will be 1 crore 40 lakhs. And in 30 days, it will be 42 crores. In 12 months, it will be nearing about 500 crores. 500 crores per year is a contribution of the beggars who have no food, no clothes, no shelter. Then in that case, do they have no right at all? How the money they have paid, begging to others, and also other people who are paying direct tax and indirect taxes, do they have no right at all to know how the money is appropriated by implementing the policies by the policymakers and the implementers? That is why the significance of right to information is there in our country. And in the global level, that right to information, if we go to Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights speaks about it, and adhering to that, our Right to Information Act was enacted in 1993. As I've said about the cardinal principles in section 12, F, G, H, these are very much important, and that is why the sovereign people are having that or should have, and they are authorized with that right to know. And even if we go to section 4 of the Act, Right to Information Act, voluntarily disclosure of information, say the government authorities, government institutions, or the government organs, they are mandated by section 4 of the Right to Information Act to disclose some information voluntarily. Say, for example, the balance sheets, say, for example, how the money is utilized, what are the infrastructural order of the institution, how the appointments are made, what will be the fund that will be appropriated for spending as salary and other parks as the case may be. So voluntary disclosure of the information is also provided as a mandate under section 4 of the Right to Information Act. So from that perspective, I personally feel that sovereign people have the right to know how the government is functioning, because we are in the interest of good governance. Thank you.
There's one more question in the chat box.
Yeah.
He's from Tansing Kankyo. He wants to ask that in the present scenario, has the term democracy turned to be ornamental? And how can political ethics be applied in corruption paralyzed political scenario?
So one thing is there. India's continuing with the polity. Polity is a kind of government. Polity is a kind of government that continued right from the Vedic time. Then Maurya period, I'm in brief, Maurya period also, later on also. But if we go to the Aristotelian classification of the states, ruled by single, it may be monarchy. If it is a monarchy, the monarch will be like philosopher, as I mentioned about Plato, that philosopher will think about philosophically the plights, the sufferings, sorrows, and how to remove those sorrows, how to wipe the sorrows, how to wipe the tears from the ears of the people. He is ruling. That is the rule by single, that is monarchy. Anarchy is also ruled by single. He doesn't have a border about the sufferings, the plights, the development, the progress, the values, the human rights, as the case may be. There are many instances in our world history. Then he has gone to second, rule by few. Rule by few is aristocracy and oligarchy. Aristocracy is a form of government where few are ruling,
and they have sense of belongingness, sense of justice, sense of responsibility, as the case may be, for the benefit of the people. And when we are talking about rule by few in another form of state, that is oligarchy, that is ruled by a few, but they don't have concern about the benefits, the human rights, human values of the ruled. That is the aspect. There are many examples. And thirdly, rule by many. In the rule by many, he said democracy, rule by many, but the rule by many, the many rulers who are jointly ruling, they do not have a sense of belonging, sense of rationality, and sense of justice. And second category, ruled by many. Aristotelian perception I'm talking about is not my view. Aristotle said, rule by polity is a classic rule by many, as it is there in our ancient India till British came. And that is polity. We talk of Indian polity, and as a result of which, Indian polity as intervention by the British invaders, and as a result of which it has been shaken. That is why when the Constitution came into being, the Indian component of the its own culture, its own heritage had to be revived, and still also we have the opportunity of innovatively reviving that culture as a democracy, as it is there in our Constitution, that democracy is to be interpreted adhering to these principles. As I've said about, Indian Constitution is a blending mixture of exotic and indigenous culture. The indigenous culture, the polity, that is ingrained in the Constitution, not in a direct form, but in an indirect form, and on the analysis of the Honorable Supreme Court, it has been established. And also the exotic form, say for example, as we are talking about fundamental rights, as we are talking about federalism, as we are talking about the cooperative federalism, and many other aspects or presidential form of republic, as the case may be, these are exotic elements, and the ingrained Indian indigenous element of culture, the polity, it is there, but then it has to be interpreted in that way, and the constitutionally normed democracy is meant by the admixture of these two cultures and its improvement in that system. So I think that way democracy has a value, and democracy is to be analyzed not directly, but with the analysis, with the reference to the power of interpretation by the Honorable Supreme Court, and also different classic writers, prolific writers on different disciplines, maybe in political science, maybe on legal science, maybe on other economic science. If we conglomerate it and try to understand it, then we'll understand the significance of the democracy that is incorporated in our Constitution.
So there's yet another question from the same person, that
Yeah.
can good governance and transparency be expected in Indian politics?
Yes. As I've said about the dust and fumes that are prevailing over the environment of good governance. And I've identified the dust and fumes and also pollutants. And after identifying those pollutants, dust and fumes in the Indian constitutional order, through the process of analysis, through the process of deliberation, through the process of educating the entire population of the country, because education is the backbone of the country, right from the primary level to the tertiary and higher level, the level of research. As I've said about, the Charter of the United Nations for the first time declared the concept of human rights and concept of
equality, equality and gender justice, no color discrimination, and as the case may be. So from that perspective, I think, and in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is also speaking about in, says, Article 26 and 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1946. It speaks about the right to education at different level of the citizen of the country, and also the obligation of the state to educate the people phase-wise. And there also, it is speaking about vocational educational institution as the case may be, IITs and ITIs as the case may be. Then, secondly, the two covenants of 1966, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. If we go to the, as I mentioned about Article 19 of the first covenant and Article 1 and 11 of the second covenant, Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, will find answer to that. As I've said about that, we are obligated to those instruments because we have already ratified those documents, and it becomes an international obligation on our part to implement it. And based on that, if we educate people properly, thoroughly, and education and health under Article 21, capital A, Right to Education Act 2009, Article 45 and 46, Article 51, capital A, clause K. And that way, that is right to education and right to formal education and informal education, as the case may be, for giving opportunities for economic opportunities under Article 41. And most importantly, Article 47 of the Constitution that speaks about health, hygiene, and also nutrition of all sections of people, as the case may be. And if we phase out these dust and fumes and impurities from the system of open government and infrastructure, conceptual part and infrastructural part, then definitely the sensitization program will definitely remove those hurdles, and the good governance will definitely work well, and it will bring smile on the face of every citizen of the country, and it will give a way for following India by rest of the world.
So there is this one last question from Roop Jyoti Das, and want to ask that, can we think that at present the political executive needs orientation from our early scriptures in administration in order to maintain discipline, ethics, and morality in public life?
Say, academically, I will speak, not otherwise. Academically, I understand that there is a need of it. One thing is that to be a teacher, to be a doctor, to be an engineer, to be a professor, whatever in every discipline, to be even in the clerical works, we require a basic educational qualification. And for the policymakers, I feel that there is a requirement of it, but then that will have to be done in a very sensitive and phased manner. For your information, in the state of Assam, the Panchayati Raj system, the basic educational qualification has been incorporated in the qualification to be a member in the Panchayati Raj system. Say, for example, Anchalik Gram Panchayat, Anchalik Panchayat, Jila Parishad. The qualification defined therein is that one must be higher secondary pass if he belongs to general category. One must be matriculate or SSLC pass if he belongs to a reserve category. Then in municipal administration as well, which has also come under the domain of the Constitution provision under Article 243, there is a equal mandate therein. So from that, why it is needed? My academic analysis, not otherwise. Say academic analysis, for that matter, what I feel, the policy making is a very important and very technical issue. Policy includes even making of law. And unless a person is properly, formally educated with and knowledgeable with the formal educational system, I feel that their deficiency will resulting into a blockade in the system. So I propose that there should be an amendment to the Constitution. It is my personal view that there should be an institution at the graduate level that after doing or qualifying the SSLC higher secondary, as one may opt for policy making institution if one young person is interested in entering into the field of policy making, right at the place of Panchayati Raj system or at the legislative system of the state or at the parliamentary system of the union. I think if at least the graduation course is introduced therein, and once a person qualifies that, their course content will be the policies, the people's hopes and aspirations, constitutional aspects, then others, rules and regulations, process of election, whatever that might be. Once they are educated with that, with a basic, and I think that institution should be made alma mater, and that may prosecute the degree, the post degree, that means PG courses, and also research in that. And I think in the near future, that will be the need of time. And a young generation, as I have talked to many of the young people, and their view is that we want educated representative. It is not my view, not my personal view, I'm analyzing that way. And I think responding to the queries that is made by the learned teacher, that yes, if we try to motivate our good public opinion, build up public opinion, especially among the young generation who are the future generation, who are the future of the country, that if we can popularize this system, that there should be an educational institution at the graduate level after doing SSLC, those people who are determined to go to that policy making, not in other way, then they should be educated that way. Only those persons, and the law relating to election, law, constitutional amendment should be made accordingly. And I think India will flourish accordingly, and the democracy will stand on its very strong footing.
So there is one more question from Dr. Mrigendra Nath Sharma. He wants to know that do you agree that RTI Act 2005 can reform our system?
It can reform our system because when we will have a right to know how the institution of the government, institution created by the constitutions are functioning, how the policies are implemented, how our money in the form of taxpayers, we being the sovereign of the country, are having right to know about it. If you go to section 3, you will find that this information is to be provided only to the citizen of the country. So it is a right of the citizen. Non-citizen doesn't have an access to, as per the mandate of that particular section. But one thing is, as I said about, there are two sides. Here also, Right to Information Act and the Right to Information Rule in the state, as well as information Central Information Commission's rules. I had the opportunity of joining or attending many of the training courses to those officers of the government of either station in relation to discussing the technicalities of right to information. And hundreds of discussions I have said that there are certain loopholes in the act and also the rules. If we improve that and clog the loopholes, it will function well. One thing is, say, Section 5 and Section 7, I'm talking about, that any citizen of the country can file a petition. And if he is a proper person, indigent person, then his whatever information is to be provided to him, it is to be provided free. But many people who are having resource, they're misusing it, engaging that person who is not having or below poverty line people to seek the information on his behalf. He is behind it. And that way, it is resulting into miscarriage of justice and also the implementation of policy properly. Second thing, that there are many activists, RTI activists you have seen in the state of Assam as well and for other states as well. They'll find they are branded as activists. Very recently in SCRT in the state of Assam, one lady IS officer, she was, so to say, hypnotized by this process by many of the journalist friends, and huge money have been sunk out. It is revealed in the investigation, and whatever that might be. So that way, if this process cannot be checked, what I mean is that that can be checked, that if it is found that a person is filing a frivolous petition, then that can be rejected. Under Section 8, subclause 2 and 3, the PIO, it is the State Public Information Officer or the Central Public Information, is entrusted with a quasi-judicial power. First, if he asks the information seeker, what is the public interest with which you are seeking the information? You must satisfy me. But that is not done in most of the cases. And secondly, the penalty to check that, I was suggesting the either government that if we make a provision in Section 20, the penal section, which provides that 250 rupees financial, and also that may go to up to 25,000. In that, there should be a clause that if the frivolous applicant, if the applicant has been found that he has submitted a frivolous application, same penalty should be imposed upon him. Then another thing, there are many people who are in the name of activist RTI. They are filing applications and the appropriate authority have to submit it, provide it within 30 days. They will do Herculean task of gathering the information, but then the information seeker is missing because the address he has provided is not proper. So what I suggested, that when an application is made by information seeker, it is to be authenticated, countersigned by a government official. In a village, Gaura is the government official. And for that matter, in any other areas, the government officials are to countersign by the identification so that he can be easily detected. And if this is done, that process can be checked, that misuse process can be checked. Then another thing, Section 25 and 26 is also very important, that the commission is to go to the people, to educate the people, to disseminate the information, how they can exercise the power, what is their responsibility. That part is not done in an effective manner. And in addition to that, preparation of the annual report, annual statement by the Information Commission of the state, and that is to be laid before the Assembly through the Cabinet and the Central Information Commission. Their assessment or annual account report is to be placed before the Parliament through the Cabinet of the Prime Minister of India. But then, in most of the cases, neither the Parliament or in the state level, the state legislature are found to discuss on these issues. And I think if these are done very effectively and these loopholes are clogged, then I think it will work well. And it has a very good objective with which this is done. And I think that will protect the interest of we the people and our money that is collected through the form of election, through the form of, say, taxes in different form, and we can enjoy a better democracy. Thank you.
There is one more participant, Maria Rashmi. She wants to ask a question. Ma'am, you're allowed to ask the question.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
So we are talking about transparency, accountability, and governance, and we see that there is a frequent clash between the state and the center for the performance of these accountability and transparency. So, and transparency is assumed to be something which gives a better governance or better accountability and less corruption. Sir, how can this clash be eradicated so that we can have a better relationship between the center and the state?
As I've said about the new process, say, for example, in e-governance, it mandates for cooperative federalism, and also the Niti Aayog, which is the planning commission, which was centralized, and the Niti Commission, National Institution for for taxing India. So whatever that might be. So through this, and I think if it is properly addressed to, and if deliberations are there at the two level, there are many discussions on different fronts between the union government and the state government. And if these issues are raised at that particular level, say, for example, in Niti Aayog or in any other form of discussion on the transparency or the federalism, cooperative federalism basic structure, then I think definitely there can be an unanimous decision that can be taken, and through that understanding, mutual understanding, that can be done appropriately. But one thing is most important, that in our taxing structure, say, for example, if we go to Article 304B, or 304, as the case may be. So any legislation, the state legislature is proposing to impose a tax on the process of interstate trade and commerce on any item, then it is to be sent to the President for discussion, and under Article 74, Clause 1 of the Constitution, the President had to get the advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister, and if that council is advising negatively, then that idea of imposing tax in the state will have to be dropped. But I personally believe that if there are in the Niti Aayog or in the GST forum as well, there can be deliberations by the states with the union government on the different issues with the objective of federal cooperative federalism, cooperation, that there from the cooperative federalism comes in. So I think it will work well, and there is a basic way for that. And the e-governance system, this is already mandated in the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for dealing so patiently with all the questions and with so
Right.
detailed explanation.
Yes, I feel it my obligation. I have tried. I don't know how much of justice I could do, but I tried at most. And I'm
It was a-
sorry for that interruption, and because of which
No, so
I
we
sorry for that.
for the disturbance caused.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to.
Deepan sir, shall I proceed with the vote of thanks?
Yes, sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Borpatrogohain, sir, for giving us your valuable time and wonderful presentation. And I hope this is a very interactive session and participants have learned a lot throughout your session. Once again, thank you, sir. Now I'd like
Thank
to
you. Thank
request.
you. And I'll be blessed if I could